I mean, a lot of people will talk about these like individual sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone. If you want to impact those three hormones, I always say you got to look at leptin, cortisol, melatonin, and really making sure that your schedule is dialed in to optimize all three. And so they all work together. What you need to know is that if your cortisol is whack, you're going to be leptin resistant. It just works that way. And if you're not making melatonin at night, you are going to be leptin resistant. All these hormonal systems actually turn on, and it's supposed to be from the signal that you're getting from natural light in the morning from sunrise, and then from that second round of light, which is UVA light. So when the sun's between 10 and 30 degrees.
Welcome back to Decentralized Radio, your one-stop shop for education on how you can take back control of your health and your wealth, and live outside of the centralized systems that are plaguing our society. We're hosting industry experts every Tuesday live and also releasing podcasts Friday morning.
Well, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Decentralized Radio. I get to do the intro today because our guest is Sarah Kleiner, Wellness. Awesome guest. I'm really excited. We're going to be diving into leptin today. Of course, we have Tristan to keep me on course. Tristan, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited for this one. This has been needed for some time and very fitting right now, given that it's kind of a end of winter here. I want to get into a little bit of seasonality, and I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's important, too, to sort of discuss a little bit of hormonal health around women's health, because we're dudes, so it's not necessarily front and center in my mind, but it's actually really important because men and women are very different in a lot of ways. And so you got to view things through a different lens. But Sarah, you've gone through like a really interesting evolution. I remember when I found you a few years back now, I was sort of getting into my own journey. And back then you were called carnivore yogi. And I sort of just wanted you, just for audience members that are not as familiar, sort of go through some of your journey into wellness and that evolution, because one thing I really respect about you is that you've never been stuck in a dogmatic viewpoint. You've always been very open with where you're at, where your thought processes are, and have always been willing to change your mind and continue to learn, where you sort of see people in various communities stop and hit an endpoint when they've sort of reached their goal, but not want to expand that knowledge any further. And there's so much more that we don't know, or as you didn't know, or I didn't know. You were the one that actually introduced me to circadian biology over a year and a half ago. So I really want to thank you for that. But yeah, tell us more about kind of how you got to where you are now and that evolution of thought throughout, because I think it's really important.
Yeah. Well, first I want to say I'm jealous of your recording spot out there. It looks awesome. You're outdoor. I'm stuck inside today. It's raining, it's gloomy, but I've got my infrared behind me here. But yeah, I started off as carnivore because I kind of got to this place of my health where like nothing was working. It was like I was trying to do everything for my health, and like all the stuff that you read about online, it wasn't working. And I was super confused. And I just was like, you know what? I've had so many people talk about this carnivore thing. Why the heck not try it? Because nothing else I'm doing is working. Granted, I do want to say that the person who had told me to try carnivore, Dr. Rimka, she had also told me I needed to get morning sunlight as well as part of it. And I thought, that's really stupid. Like, why would I go outside and like look at the sun every day? Okay, go look at the sun, whatever. Wear weird glasses at night. She told me those things back in 2018. And I was like, what's the diet? I want to do the diet. Like the diet is the thing. I need to do the diet, And so I ignored the sun and the blocking blue light at night piece and dove into carnivore. And honestly, it did a lot of good things for me. Like I had gut issues to the point where my husband would literally like sleep in another room because my stomach would get upset, and I would have this it's not very like exciting or like ladylike to talk about, but I would get this like gas that was like a sulfur bomb that was going off, and it would start going off at like 10 o'clock and it would go the whole night, and it was just wretched, right? I would like wake myself up being like, oh, like my gut was a disaster. And I always looked kind of pregnant. I was teaching yoga full time, hence the carnivore yogi. So I had been teaching yoga for like 13 years, like full time, 12 years or so at that point. full time in studio, with people, heavily bought into the like lots of plants, nuts and seeds, kind of dogma. I was eating meat at that point, but not a lot of it because I was afraid of it still. But I was so desperate at that point that I was like, forget it. Like, I'm just going to do this. Why the heck not? And it did. Like within just a couple weeks, like my gut issues were just gone. Like my stomach was flat for the first time in like 5 or 6 years. My skin was totally clear. At the end of 30 days, my mental health felt so good. I was like, I'm never, ever touching plants again. Like, how it is. Like you do it and you're like, this is it. This is the thing, and it was great for like the first year. I mean, awesome. Then at that 1 year mark, I started having some issues, right? Like my minerals were off. My sleep started getting crappy. I knew my hormones were not optimal. I had stopped getting my monthly cycle. It was like missing. But a lot of the carnivore people were like, you're just 40. Like, you're 40. Like, you're going to start having weird cycles. And like, but I didn't buy it. I was just like, I just don't buy this. You know what I mean? And so thankfully I didn't listen to that. And well, it took me a while to change, but it was in 2021 that I was given the opportunity to interview Dr. Jack Cruz. It came to me through Kelly Bento. She's a really good friend now. She had been following me when I was carnivore, and she like even had gone in my DMs one day and was like, don't wear those AirPods. Like I was wearing AirPods all the time in my stories. And she's like, don't wear those. Those are like wrecking your, they're wrecking you. This is why you're gaining weight. This is why all this stuff's happening to you. Cause I had started gaining weight on carnivore. I gained like 20 pounds and I was so pissed. I was like, how the hell do you gain 20 pounds and not eat sugar? Like, how is this even a thing? I'm doing what everyone says I'm supposed to be doing. I'm fasting. I'm not eating until a certain time of day. I'm time restricted eating, counting my calories. I'm gaining weight. What the hell, And I was trying to get pregnant at the same time. That was like a big secret, is that I wanted to get pregnant and I wanted to have a second child. And I had had 2 miscarriages. And when I talked to Dr. Cruz, I was in the middle of doing IVF, which is very expensive, very intense. Like you're injecting yourself every evening, every morning. You're going to the doctor every other day for ultrasound and blood work. And it's a lot. You got to go through surgeries. And so I was like really on this journey to, I really wanted to have this baby. And I was in the middle of IVF and I met Dr. Cruz, and he basically like flipped me. He's like, you have to start understanding light and leptin. And I was like, he's like, this is more important than being on your diet. You know how Cruz is. He just laid it out for me. And I was like, crap. Like, I thought I had it figured out with carnivore, and I have all these like people following me, and I have all these clients coming to me with the same darn issues, not necessarily the miscarriages, but the women who were like gaining weight and like frustrated. And I'm like, something is up, And so I started doing, Dr. Cruz has a leptin prescription, and I started doing my own version of that. I had to like tailor it more to women. I had to shift a few things, not much, but a few things I had to shift around for women and for myself. And after the first like 8 weeks of that, kind of doing my own leptin protocol, I had lost 30 pounds. And then I got pregnant like 2 months later without IVF, like my, totally like no IVF, no surgeries, none of that stuff. And got pregnant with my son, had an amazing pregnancy, practice all the quantum stuff still. And he is like, I think he's 16 months now. He just turned 16 months. He's like doing amazing. He's just an amazing little boy. And I've shifted the way I think about everything. Like I no longer am this dogmatic diet person. I am like I guess you call me a light person now, I still think nutrition's important, but I don't look at it through the same lens. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an incredible story, and as Ryan mentioned, it's great that you had that open mind to be willing to change, and a lot of people should, because typically you get only so far with just diet or just optimizing a couple things that are very mainstream, and people often their own cognitive bias is like, no, like this is it. So kudos to you for that. And we talked definitely, we talked to Dr. Cruz, we talked to a lot of folks about light, but as we talked pre-show, we haven't really got into leptin a ton, and I think it's so important from the, hormonal signaling perspective. So maybe you can just start to lay it out for people. What exactly is leptin? Why is it, so important as kind of this master signaling hormone? And maybe like, why is it so under discussed in the centralized mainstream healthcare system?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't discovered until 1994. And we all know just from being in the health space how long it takes standard allopathic medicine to actually catch up to research. Even if it's out there, it's glaring. If you go into PubMed and type in leptin and PCOS, leptin and menopause, leptin and hot flashes, leptin and infertility, like huge amount of data, huge amount of research on leptin and thyroid, leptin and like it's a master circadian signaling hormone. So all of those things I just mentioned, leptin impacts and signals in some way. And so we know that 93% of people, recent data shows they are metabolically unhealthy. And if you are pre-diabetic, which a lot, like 84% of people that are pre-diabetic don't even know that they're pre-diabetic, right? They just are. And they're already having like all these symptoms. If you're already pre-diabetic and you're already like on your, even if you're pre-diabetic, you're leptin resistant. So it's a master circadian signaling hormone. And when you become leptin resistant, the stored energy on your body and your brain are no longer communicating. And so your thyroid can be dysregulated. Essentially your hormones are dysregulated. People always think of it as like an appetite thing. And yeah, the appetite is absolutely involved, but they don't know all the other things that leptin impacts, like your immune system, your heart health, your bone health. All of it is impacted by this hormone, and it's a light hormone. And so again, master circadian signaling hormone, but it is strongly impacted by light, and having these light dark signals corrected and really dialed in is the first step to reversing leptin resistance.
This podcast is brought to you by our lead sponsor, EMRtek. EMRtek manufactures high-quality, high-powered red light therapy devices. In my opinion, red and infrared light are two of the biggest nutrient deficiencies in our modern society due to our indoor lifestyles. Red light therapy devices, like the ones from EMRtek, can help combat that by providing high-powered red light while being indoors. I personally use mine every morning and every evening. Red and near infrared light is extremely beneficial for energy production in our body because it boosts mitochondrial function and penetrates deep into the cell. It is also extremely beneficial for skin health, eye health, as well as our circadian rhythms. And this is actually pretty much why I bought everyone in my family an EMRtek red light therapy device for Christmas. EMRtek panels are low flicker, low EMF, and use targeted wavelengths such as 830 and 630 nanometers, amongst others, to get extremely effective results. For more information, go to EMRtek.com and use our code DRadio10 for 10% off your order. That's EMRtek.com with our code DRadio, DRADIO 10 to save at checkout.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about leptin to me is actually nothing about the science behind leptin, but just the idea that we've known about it since, like you said, the mid 90s, and it's something that Jack Kruse talks about a lot. He was, I think, maybe besides you, the first person that introduced me to the idea of leptin resistance being a root issue to many people's sort of modern ailments, whether that is like a hypothyroidism or stubborn weight loss. Because even within the allopathic space or the holistic space, there's still such a focus around insulin as like we got to get insulin in check. But now when I sort of view sort of the hierarchy of like hormones to hit first, I always go to leptin and the circadian its circadian ties first. Like if we're gonna hit anything right away, pretty much no matter what you have, I tell them like we got to get that light stuff figured out first, meaning like getting optimizing obviously daylight and minimizing light at night. Especially, I think that's what trips people up the most, is like they can kind of get the daytime in, and then like at night is when they like to veg out and scroll on their phone for 2 hours before bed, and that completely wrecks the night rhythm. One thing I want to talk about, maybe tying into leptin here, is also cortisol, because a lot of that goes back to light as well. So maybe you can kind of tell us about the ties with like seeing, especially that first morning light, and setting leptin right up in the leptin melanocortin pathway, and then also sort of how that sets the pace for the day. Because like you said, leptin is so involved in so many processes or disease states that it's just like it's actually kind of nice in a way, because it makes it simple on a high level, because it's like you can focus on one thing in that way. But kind of tell us about how leptin kind of ties in with all these other hormones, and why that light rhythm is so important for getting it all in a row.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people will talk about these like individual sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, all of them. And they all play a part. But these, if you want to impact those three hormones, I always say you got to look at leptin, cortisol, melatonin, and really making sure that your schedule is dialed in to optimize all three. And so they all work together. They all are in relation to one another. So leptin and cortisol, there's some really interesting PubMed studies there to show the inverse relationship there. There's relationship between leptin and melatonin. Again, you can find that in PubMed as well. But what you need to know is that if your cortisol is whack, you're going to be leptin resistant. It just works that way. And if you're not making melatonin at night, you are going to be leptin resistant. Why? Because we'll start with cortisol. Your body is supposed to make cortisol in response to the amount of blue light that's available that happens at sunrise, and then again at UVA. All these hormonal systems actually turn on, and it's supposed to be from the signal that you're getting from natural light in the morning from sunrise, and then from that second round of light, which is UVA light. So when the sun's between 10 and 30 degrees. So a lot of systems begin to come online at that point. And what is really happening with people is they're waking up looking straight at their phone, right? They're not going outside. They're not eating breakfast, a lot of them. So having a good protein and fat breakfast is really important for leptin signaling as well. And it also can create a situation where cortisol doesn't go too high. Because a lot of people get up and drink the bulletproof coffee and then just like run off, be on their phone, get going through the day. And then cortisol just gets way up high, the blood sugar and everything is a mess for the rest of the day. So cortisol and leptin are related simply that way. The morning routine is important, but the evening routine is equally important, because if your body is not making pineal melatonin when you're sleeping, leptin is supposed to dock to the brain, to the hypothalamus between about 12 and 2 every night to give a report. And it's like, how much stored energy does Sarah have on her body? How much sugar's in the liver? How much body fat does she have? And then I'm going to give you instructions to have thyroid, sex hormones, all these other hormones. I'm going to give you instructions, and your immune system, your heart health. I'm going to give you instructions so that you can do what you need to do to keep the body running efficiently. And if that is not happening, you can only imagine what kind of dysfunction is going on with people's hormones, because they're not sleeping. They've got their phone in their face. They're sleeping with their phone charged next to their bed. That's emitting non-native EMF, because non-native EMF can also disrupt the pineal melatonin as well. So people forget about that one. And, so that's kind of like the bird's eye view of how all these hormones are interrelated.
Yeah, and you mentioned as well earlier that 93%, which I think is an increase from 88% when I read some of the research, are like metabolically unhealthy, which post-COVID, which is just incredible. But as we talked about here, most people kind of relate that to insulin resistance, and that's always the big marker. But what you're saying is that leptin resistance kind of precedes that; it's preceding everything. So maybe you could outline the differences between the two, and then what exactly does it mean to be leptin resistant from the brain communicating with bodily functions.
Yeah, I mean, just basically what I mentioned about that download of information not happening at night. It's just not there. It's not happening. Eating all the time, again, it's something that can cause insulin resistance as well, but people snacking all the time, you're bringing leptin up constantly. Eating too close to bed, that's going to block that melatonin production as well, because insulin's going to go up. So leptin actually signals insulin. That's the thing. So insulin resistance is a huge issue, but people are going to become leptin resistant first. So the first thing that breaks down before you actually become insulin resistant is this communication between the brain and the stored energy on your body. So most people have been in that state where their brain just literally doesn't know what they've got on store, where they've got on board, before they hit that dysfunctional level of actually seeing their fasting insulin go up, seeing side effects of that, of like maybe PCOS or hot flashes, things like that. A lot of people have these dysregulated blood sugar. That's also something that goes along with the leptin resistance as well. But it's essentially, it happens first. That's the most important thing people need to know. So you may have blood sugar that's just kind of like a little on the high side when you check it. That's where I was. And it was like always like fasting blood sugar was always like 90s, low 100, even though I wasn't eating breakfast, even though I wasn't eating any carbohydrates, even though I was fasting, I was doing all this stuff. My body was just kind of like in this like stressed out state, because it's like we don't really know what's going on. And so that's kind of hopefully that is a simple explanation.
No, that's good. And I just had one thought when you were on that, because it was sort of one thing I was thinking about when I was really heavy in like carnivore based, and I started noticing similar issues with my own blood sugar and like just general feeling and like sleep irritability and stuff like that, inability to sleep. Is that in relation to like leptin coming out of whack? Is that sort of what you related those problems to, was like your leptin either never was addressed or it became out of balance during that time period?
Yeah, I think it really came out of balance because my cortisol was such a disaster. And again, cortisol and leptin have such an inverse relationship. And when your body is in this constant like stressed out state, that's when you're having that dysregulation of cortisol that's going to impact your leptin. So you can't look at one without the other. There's all these like cortisol people on Instagram now that are like, it's your cortisol, it's your cortisol. I'm like, yeah, but that's impacting other things. And I think it was like the skipping breakfast all the time. My adrenals were just like, what the hell are you doing to me? Staying in this low carb state 365 days a year, not being metabolically flexible at all, it became a stress on my body. And again, there was like the insomnia, the weight gain, and you look at side effects of dysregulated cortisol, I had all of them. Right. But when you have dysregulated cortisol, 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a leptin issue as well, because they are so, inversely related.
Yeah, and another thing I kind of wanted to get into there that's probably really common with, or is pretty common with women, is like hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's. And I know that leptin and thyroid hormones are very acutely tied in terms of function. How do you think of addressing the root cause of, so many people that have hypothyroidism, and in terms of addressing leptin resistance as well?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I think a lot of the autoimmune stuff is also nervous system related as well. I'm starting to think more and more of that. I know it's all related, right? Like the body is just kind of in this state of cortisol dysregulation, more sympathetic dominance, or they've gone into a different branch of the parasympathetic nervous system where they're in a functional freeze. And those things, I think the nervous system has this ability to impact the body on this level of autoimmune conditions. And then you bring in the light story as well. These people are not seeing sunlight. Their thyroid is completely dysregulated because they're not getting UVA light. They're seeing artificial light at night. So they're never getting into these like deeper repair states. And again, leptin is a signal for the immune system. So time and time again, if you are leptin resistant, you can get dysregulation in your immune system as well. So I feel like it's like multifaceted, but just looking at it from the viewpoint of leptin, again, it's a signal to the immune system. And so these like autoimmune issues, hypothyroid, Hashimoto's, all of those, the body is not feeling safe. It doesn't know where it is. It doesn't know what time of day it is, what time of year it is. And there's dysregulation of that sort.
There you go. I just had a thought based on the autoimmunity perspective, because that's sort of my own background, and I totally believe everything you just said about nervous system dysregulation as being a huge root issue to this cortisol imbalance as well. And it's sort of like you said, so multifaceted because you have environmental issues, whether that's non-native EMF, light environment, just work-life stress, trauma. That is another thing we've talked about with Mike Lehman's on the podcast. So it's super multifaceted. One thing I think about too is when it comes to like vitamin D, we talk about light a lot and maxing your light exposure. And I've found that even in autoimmune patients that are kind of doing all the right things to get all this in order, they still have like a chronically low vitamin D despite the sun exposure. I would love to know, like, what have you seen like in your own clientele and like what you've seen online with that? Because there's so many things that could go to even like chronic inflammation, keeping it down. And sort of, I'd love your thoughts on sort of that issue with it too. Is like, how do you get ahead when you have all these multifaceted bombardments?
Yeah, I mean, when you're not you're not seeing the vitamin D go up, there's typically a Hashimoto's or autoimmune, something that's like pulling on the system, creating this like energy crisis essentially in the body. So you have to do all the basics that people are just, I think this is stupid. Why would I do it? But you have to do that to optimize your mitochondria. I also think that there can be a deuterium issue as well with some of these people. And you need to look more closely at deuterium. Dr. Sarah Kleiner, a good friend of mine, she's talked a lot about deuterium recently, but there's a deuterium issue, and that doesn't necessarily mean go out and buy 3 cases of deuterium depleted water and do a depletion that way. You can make yourself deplete deuterium naturally, right? Through making sure your circadian rhythms are dialed in. If your circadian rhythms are dialed in, don't waste your money on deuterium depleted water, please. It's not going to be effective. It's going to be a real expensive water that you're drinking. Making sure you're sweating, doing some kind of sauna, even cold can help with that as well. Cold therapy, grounding is so important to pull those electrons into the body and make the mitochondria more efficient, right? Let those electrons move across the electron transport chain more efficiently. Same thing with cold. And so a lot of times with an autoimmune condition, there's something pulling the system down. And I do think that deuterium can play a big role in this as well. And I always recommend nervous system work for people. I'm huge on that. I think that's crucial. But what's very regulating for your cortisol melatonin patterns, you have to do the basics first. Don't tell me you have a dysregulated nervous system if you're laying in bed with your phone in your face until midnight every night. If you're not willing to go outside and the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is check your phone notifications. Like, I don't want to hear it. If you're not willing to let those things go, it's going to be hard.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge piece, but it's sometimes, there's this balance as well for people, like how much to take on. And like cold therapy is a good example. And I'm curious to get your take there because we know that leptin plays like a huge role in the beiging of adipose tissue, like thyroid hormones, imperative for uncoupling and mitochondrial health. But how do you implement, or how would you recommend someone who is leptin resistant to do cold therapy, because it's kind of this balance between like a stressor that's good but could be like way too much for them?
I mean, I really like to have them doing my leptin protocol for a good like 6 weeks or so before I'm going to push in anything more than putting your face in ice water or your wrists. I think that's a really great place to start, or just going outside on a cold day when there's like, with no jacket on for a couple minutes here and there. I think everyone can do those things. Turning on the shower for 30 seconds at the end of your shower, like that's not going to like push someone more than likely into a stress state if you're just pulsing it in, because we do know that cold can help to drop serum leptin levels. And again, Dr. Sarah and she stayed with me for like 6 weeks. She came and like lived here for 6 weeks last year, or just in October, November of last year. And so that's why I talk about her a lot, because we talk about quantum stuff together all the time. And she was telling me about some research she found that cold has the ability to basically like kill off fat cells, because we get these fat cells as adults. And even if we lose weight, all we do is like shrink them. Right. And so people will lose weight and then their body is kind of like, you've got all these fat cells still. And it's so much easier to gain weight quickly when you have those. But she stayed with me for 6 weeks, so she knows I'm not full of it, that I'm like doing the deal here. And she's like, saw old pictures of me because I was like 230 pounds, 220 pounds. Like I was always really overweight in high school, in my 20s. Like I would just bounce with my weight, like 100 pounds up and down, crazy. And I'm pretty slim now, I'm pretty lean. And she watched me, she's like, pretty sure you like killed your fat cells with a lot of this cold therapy that you did. The thing is, for women, I know I'm going off on like 20 tangents here. You have to be respectful of your hormones. Like number one, you've got to do the basics first. You do some cold face dunks, wrist dunks, and leave it at that. Once you have established more like better leptin signaling, then you can, as a woman, start to play with cold, like plunging, and have it done with nuance in respect to your hormones. So typically the first 10 days of the cycle, more the follicular cycle, it's a little easier to do, except maybe like the first 1 or 2 days, like that can be painful. Like I avoid, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. But hormonally, your body is a lot more resilient in that first like 10, 14 days or so. Some women are fine during, that middle cycle, but most women, that week before, they need to chill. Like days like 21 through 28, I don't push the cold plunging. I don't push fasting. I don't push carb restriction. I'm more like, okay, let's let the body go more into rest mode. And so you really, if you're going to do cold therapy as a woman, if you're leptin resistant, I think you do have to have some respect for your hormones and not overdo it. Like we're so like more is better, 30-day cold plunge challenge. No, no one should do that. Men either. You want to do 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 3 times a week, never directly following a workout where you've ripped muscle, right? Like there's some basics that I think everyone should respect with cold therapy.
If you're a health conscious food consumer who's also very active, you know how big of a struggle it is to find a bar that is both convenient and nutrient dense. That's why I was so excited when I discovered the Alpa Bar. The Alpa Bar is a meat-based bar that contains only simple ingredients, 100% grass-fed beef, tallow, and honey, and is both nutrient dense and convenient and packs a caloric punch of over 300 calories. For me, this was a game changer and is now the go-to snack and fuel source I use when I'm hiking, camping, hunting, skiing, or doing anything in the outdoors and I don't have the resources to cook a full meal. The Alpa Bar is made proudly in Colorado and only uses locally sourced meat. JJ and Rob are also extremely based and accept Bitcoin for payment. I highly recommend you check out the Alpa Bar for any time you need a nutrient dense and convenient snack on the go. Check them out at eatalpa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout to get a 5% discount. And if you pay in Bitcoin, you can get an additional discount on top of that. That's eataupa.com and use code DRadio5 at checkout. Yeah, it's really important, I think, as well. And I've gotten in actually some debates online with some repeat and people, but
Oh God.
it's I think I think it's even more important for women, and you just outlined that like in a fantastic manner that yeah, it's going to change depending on what time of the month it is. And getting back in tune with that kind of aligns with everything that you preach, is like getting back in tune with your body, your biology, and also your environment. So from like that hormonal perspective, because this is again so important from a fertility, if people are trying to conceive or just optimize or prepare for that, how is getting sufficient light exposure throughout the day like so important for those hormones to signal and to function properly? Because people get all fixated on lab tests and things like that, but we know, especially from Dr. Cruz's work, that it's really the light that's kind of going to give them the direction, right? Maybe you can better explain that and tell people how important it is for hormonal health to get outside.
Yeah, I mean, just on the cortisol aspect alone, because cortisol is this master hormone, and if you're making too much of it, it's actually going to create low progesterone, estrogen, testosterone. It's going to make those other hormones lower. So just that natural signal of light in the morning is going to tell your body to make the appropriate amount of cortisol, and it's also going to turn on the HPA and HPG axes, like the signal of light from the sun turns those on. So everyone's like, I have HPA axis dysregulation. I'm like, what's your morning routine? Are you going outside? Are you seeing sun? Sounds too simple to be true, but what is a switch that turns those things on? Morning sunlight, right? And then you get thyroid hormone, you get all these other sex hormones that are really synthesized. UVA is kind of that magic time for that synthesizing to actually happen. And then you start to make the serotonin in the UVA, which gets converted to that night's melatonin. During the day, it's important to get sunlight on your skin for, I think, the near infrared benefits, because the research with Reiter and Zimmerman shows that near infrared allows the mitochondria to make this subcellular melatonin. So it's kind of like, if you have kids that leave crap all over the house like mine do, or like find underwear in the most random spots. So during the day, I'm going to go through the house and like pick up the underwear and weird socks and like random stuff. That's what the subcellular melatonin does to like the ROS. So it's like you've got little fires going on in your body. When you get the near infrared light on your skin, your body's making this subcellular melatonin to clean up all this, little fires, little damage happening through the day, so that when you get to nighttime, you get darkness, pineal melatonin can actually do a more efficient job of cleaning things up. Autophagy, apoptosis, all these fancy words that all the fasting people throw out. If you're not making melatonin, you're not doing autophagy and apoptosis. End of story. Like you're just not. And so sunlight, we talk about vitamin D, but the morning light is crucial for hormone balance, cortisol, sex hormones, thyroid hormone, all of that HPA, HPG axis all happens in the morning light. And then during the day, you still need to be getting it on your skin so that the pineal melatonin doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting at night, because eventually it's not, with what we have going on in our society, our bodies have a lot of messes to clean up in our sleep.
Yeah, no, I'm actually really glad you brought that up, because that was something that was on my mind. And we talked to Dr. Deanna Minnick about melatonin not too long ago. And it was like a really interesting deep dive just on, I had no idea just how pervasive melatonin was. It's very much a symbiotic relationship of light and darkness. And I think a lot of people can maybe grasp the light stuff on some degree, but they mess up when it gets to the darkness aspect of it really easily, because it's like, especially during the winter, you want to turn lights on, you want to be able to see. And so it's like a whole nother ball game when you get to nighttime. One thing I wanted to ask you along those same lines of sort of regulating these pieces is, and maybe there's a difference between men and women, is like when it comes to the food component and leptin, we talk a lot about seasonality on the show and seasonal eating. Where do you start with someone on that when you know they're coming to you very leptin resistant, regardless of time of year? Does seasonality still play a huge role food wise in that, or is there a different area you start depending on a man or woman, or how do you sort of go around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, because it depends on like what they're currently eating. Speaking of repeat, I've been getting more and more repeat people who are like, oh, I went on this like repeat thing to like fix my hormones, and now I have PCOS, and now I have prediabetes, and now I've gained 40 pounds when I was just trying to like balance my hormones. And they're just eating 6 times a day. They're eating all these carbs and sugar and honey. And like, I'm not demonizing carbs and sugar and honey. Like, I think once you become leptin sensitive, you can handle those foods, right? At the right time of year, the right time of day, you can. However, if you're 30, 40 pounds overweight and you have PCOS, you should not be eating 12 times a day, 6 times a day, whatever. You shouldn't be eating all the sugar and all the honey and all the carbs. But I'm not going to have you start on day one to just cut all of that out, because this is what happened. And I have a private membership group. So I stay close to the people doing my work daily. I'm in there answering questions, live stream. Like, I'm very connected to the people doing this work, because I have to see what are the holes in what I'm teaching, what are the holes in how people can understand this and implement it. Every single time someone's like, I started your program and now I can't sleep. Why is it? I'm doing sunrise. I'm wearing blue blockers after sunset. Why can't I sleep? I'm like, did you go from 300 grams of carbs a day down to 50 in a week? Well, I thought the diet, I just want to change. I'm like, no, do not do that. So you have to bring people down slowly. If you're eating 6 times a day, we're going to try to bring you to 3 as quickly as possible, but that might take some time. If you're eating 300 grams of carbs, I'm going to try to bring you, if you have 40, 50 pounds to lose, down to 50 or below, but that we're going to take some time doing that. And so the seasonality is where, when we do add in carbohydrates, you want to ideally stick to local and seasonal foods, right? Can't always happen 100% of the time, but there's things like, if you're going to do a day where you have some carbs in January, I'm going to recommend strongly you don't use bananas to do your carb, to refeed with your carbs. I'm going to have you look more to like the cellar stable foods, like the squashes and the root veggies and things like that. So we're eating whole food and bioavailable protein. I say that now because I polarized the hell out of people for years as the carnivore yogi. So now when I talk about food, I say eat bioavailable protein, because they can Google it. What's bioavailable protein? Eggs, meat, fish. That's what you need. Don't go buying all the powders and bars and all that junk that's loaded with deuterium. Just eat meat, eat eggs, eat protein, fill the back end with your healthy fats. And if you're having carbs, they should be local, seasonal, and kind of looking into those ways of eating. So I know it was kind of like a complicated answer, but I mean, that's why I have my membership group, because I need to stay in contact with these people. I don't want people getting my 21-day program and being like, this doesn't work, because they've had autoimmune disease for 25 years. I get people with brain injuries. I get people that they have things going on with their body where they are drained. Their mitochondria has worked so hard to keep up. And so you do. And sometimes that's like a tough love conversation of like, I'm sorry, but you have to spend more time outside in the morning. Like, I'll get people like, I've been doing this program for 2 months and I'm not losing weight. I'm like, let's talk about your day. Let's break it down. I want to talk to you about your day. Well, I'm getting 2 minutes out in sunrise and then another 2 minutes in UVA light. And then I'm inside all day. And I'm like, okay, like, what part of the program did you miss? And I know it can be a tough conversation for people, but if you're really sick and you really are trying to heal, sometimes you do have to change things. And that's not, I'm not like Cruz. I'm not like, oh, move, you have to move. Everyone needs to move. Because I think you can still heal in northern climates and northern environments. We have to maybe push in more things like red light therapy, hydrogen, clean water, utilize. I'm huge on water now, utilizing that. We have to sometimes pull out a lot more things if you're in that really dysregulated state coming into this, and you have to be serious about the light piece. Again, everyone wants to skip over the light and go to the food. And I'm like, I have a coach in my group, a nutrition coach. She's been through the Quantum Biology Collective. She knows the deal. But I will literally send people to her. We have Zoom meetings that she does. I'm like, bring your food diary. Let Becky take a look at it. We'll go from there. But Becky, every time before she asks for a food diary, she's going to ask them, what is your light routine? Are you wearing your blue blockers? Are you getting out from morning sunlight? Are you doing, what does that look like? And I will say 9 times out of 10, there's an issue with the light routine that is causing them to eat more, right? They don't see this relationship between gathering electrons, making your body more energy efficient, and how much they're needing to eat to keep themselves going all the time. I mean, it's definitely an inverse relationship.
Yeah, I think the food is addressed because it's almost far easier to address, like in a modern lifestyle. It's pretty challenging, especially if someone's working like a 9 to 5 in, indoor artificial lighting, especially if it's wintertime. Like I have to be extremely deliberate here in Wyoming. How do you like what are some easy things that people can do that, yeah, maybe work like an office job or don't have as much flexibility to just be outside, work remote like we do.
I mean, you're going to have to get yourself to a place where you can do a little bit more carb restriction, a little bit more fasting. We're going to have to pull in those things to bring the inflammation down. And that's not a fun conversation to have because you got all the repeat people saying it's going to kill your thyroid. If you, if you do the appropriate amount of mineral replacement and you carb cycle, likely it's going to actually be helpful for you to push in some keto and fasting, but also things like red light therapy. Get a little battery operated red light panel to keep at your desk if you can, or sauna space red light bulb to keep at your desk. That can be helpful. Take as many breaks as you can to go outside. Use hot and cold, use a cold therapy in the morning as a Zeitgeber. So you can use the food as a Zeitgeber, a secondary circadian timekeeper, and cold in the morning and then warm before bed. So maybe a nice hot Epsom salt bath or magnesium bath. Maybe you go in the sauna for a little bit if you have access to one in the evening, but most people it's a hot bath or a hot shower. But we have to be super intentional if you live in those climates. And I really think the people in those climates, like if you look at Norway, Sweden, those like places where people live, there's a lot of depression there. There's a lot of mental health issues there, but also some of them are the happiest people in the world. What do they have in those locations? Cold therapy and sauna, as I've been corrected by some Finnish ladies in my DMs on Instagram. She's like, comes in a voice note, you're saying it wrong. It's sauna, but they're like super big into sauna there. And what's so great about sauna is it expands the water inside of your body. So it charges the water battery inside of your body. So you really, if you live in somewhere where there's less sun, you have to be more intentional and with food, with light, with temperature, all of it. So I think it is a bit more challenging, but there's also a great amount of opportunity that you have to heal because melatonin is a master antioxidant. It does, as you talk to Deanna, like it does so many amazing things in the body that we're still learning about. So if you're in a cold, dark environment, maximize the hell out of that. Sleep longer. Get the dark, get the cold, really let that work for you. And then when the UV light is out, when it is sunny, then you're going to maximize that. But I think vitamin D and melatonin have this really interesting relationship, and like an inverse relationship as well. And most people are like, oh, I got to take my vitamin D supplements. I got to use my Sperity lamp. I got to do this, that, and the other because I'm not getting enough vitamin D in the winter. And I'm like, I think you get another opportunity to maximize on healing using cold and dark.
Artificial blue light from technology is destroying our health. It disrupts melatonin production, sleep quality, and our circadian rhythms, which has been linked to pretty much all chronic disease. It also rewires our dopamine reward system, which makes it addictive by design. That is why I'm so thankful to have found the Daylight computer, the first company in the world making a computer that has a blue light free screen. They use paper reflective screen technology, so it's blue light free, flicker free, eye strain free, and is easily used outdoors so you can use technology while getting the benefits of full spectrum sunlight. For more information, you can listen to our recent podcast with the founder of Daylight Computer, Anjan, on his incredibly inspiring story on why he wants to bring technology to the masses that is not detrimental to our health. You can go to buy.daylightcomputer.com/dradio to pre-order the Daylight tablet today and begin using your technology in a fashion that's way more in line with our biology and nature. Yeah, I think leaning into that is so important. That's what I talk about a lot. Deanna talks about that cyclicality relationship between vitamin D and melatonin. It's so important. And yeah, I mean, us three here, like we're all pretty European descent. Like I think we're all built to really
H2.
survive the seasons. Not only, yeah, haplotype group meant to thrive, right, in the winter and uncouple, but you have to give your body the right input signals. And you brought up something, the sauna thing is hilarious. I've actually been to Finland, and that was like the most amazing experience, going in the 200-degree sauna and then in a frozen lake. But that's something, maybe you could talk a little bit about that people don't realize, that what it's from the infrared light, right? The heat, and the exclusion zone water. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because I think that's tremendously important.
Yeah, I mean, so like our body has this battery, and the battery is really like that exclusion zone water in the body. Like, so how much cellular water do you have? And what people don't realize is that things that you are going to do are going to drain that body battery, are going to drain your water. Like Dr. Gerald Pollack in his lab, he showed a 15% decrease in the EZ water when exposed to Wi-Fi. So like literally your cellular water can go down by 15% if you're like flooding your body with non-native EMF, Wi-Fi, all this stuff all the time, which most of us are. But he also saw when exposed to infrared that the EZ water expanded fourfold. So there are things we can do to build that water in the body back up. Things like infrared, so sauna, I've got fire going, red light therapy panels are fantastic for that. Grounding, cold actually can do that as well. And so all these like natural things that we talk about in the sauna, especially, that can increase the energy capacity of the body and the coherence in the body as well. I don't know if you guys have had Veda Austin on and looked at any of her work. She's amazing. Super fascinating.
We know who she is, yeah, but we haven't had her on. That'll be definitely a future episode.
She did an amazing treat for my community. She did like a presentation almost. It was like a 2-hour long podcast, and she did this ridiculously amazing presentation with slides, like showing how different things can change that structure of the water. And when you see it like that, this visual representation, you can never think about cellular water and the water inside of your body. Like that's 99% of your body's, by cellular volume is this water. And so it really gets your brain thinking differently about what's going to pull that water down, what's going to dehydrate us on that cellular level, and what's going to charge up that body's energy battery. Again, the sunlight, grounding. There's so many benefits to these things. It's not just some woo-woo stuff. There's actually like real science behind it now. And if you're struggling with your appetite, you're hungry all the time, you've got these like illnesses, conditions, and you're not doing these things, I implore you to definitely give it a shot.
No, that's actually been a thought on my mind too lately, is that idea of like structured water, easy water, all that water stuff is super important. I find that to be one of the commonalities you see in people with, I use autoimmune disease as an example just because that's my background. But if you have people that are just like chronically dehydrated, it's not the same. And Carrie talks about this a lot. And we had her on to talk about the collagen matrix and sort of that super highway for electrons and stuff. And it's super fascinating. I have people to go watch the episode if you want to learn more about that. But like hydration is super important. And like you said, it's about all these other things other than just drinking water. I wanted to ask you one thing about infrared sauna, because I know Jack has strong opinions about, like, he's kind of against the idea of like just buying like a sauna and using an infrared sauna. What are your thoughts? Is there a benefit to using an infrared sauna still, or is it better to like just like if you go to Finland, like use their thermal pools and like the ones that are just like on the natural vents and stuff? Or is there still a benefit because it's still infrared light? But I think about EMF coming off of all this stuff too.
Definitely an EMF factor for sure. I have one. I know Carrie has a Clear Light. I've got a Sunlighten. Those two brands are pretty low non-native EMF. I've tested it with my meter, and I had Shane, when he came, he tested all that stuff and my cold plunge and all that, and just to check for the non-native EMF. So there is a non-native EMF factor, but I think the benefits outweigh that. And this is, there's division in the quantum community of like absolutes on different things. This is one where I'm like, I think it's a benefit that's going to outweigh the harm. But I understand why people say that. I just think, you know, don't sleep with your phone next to your head. Turn your Wi-Fi off at night, and 15-20 minutes in a near infrared sauna is not going to be it's going to be better for you to do it than not, honestly. So yeah, but some people are like, oh, we don't know the long-term effects of those. I mean, I've heard all those arguments, but just like clinically, I see more benefit to doing it than not. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if it's plugged into power, it's going to have an EMF, but everything, we need to use things that are plugged into power at some point. But like you said, the sleep sanctuary is tremendously important there. One thing that is also something we've discussed on this podcast I've talked to Michael Crawford, is about DHA. And just because of your backstory in, really just having a crazy transformation and then getting pregnant, like right in the midst of it all, how do you think about, and obviously through a quantum lens, compared to carnivore, which doesn't pay too much attention to DHA, how do you think about its importance now from a diet perspective? Because it's, to me, might be the most important nutrient in our diet, right?
Yeah, it's imperative. I mean, that's in my leptin, my 21-day leptin reset. I have like a bunch of intro videos, and like day one, I tell you, day one, here's the things that you need to do dietary wise, whether you're pulling carbs down or not. You gotta have a good source of DHA 5 days a week, period. At least, and so I'm big. I love salmon roe because it's easy, it's just a spoonful, and people are worried about, the mercury and all that. And you had Crawford on, so it's not as big of an issue as people are making it out to be at all. But for me, I just do the salmon roe. My kids do it. I did it all the way before pregnancy, during pregnancy, during breastfeeding. My son, now that he's eating food, like at 6 months, I started him eating salmon roe. He loves it. And I think it's crucial. My son started freaking talking at 5 weeks old. It's everyone's always commenting at how like he's so ahead and he has all these, he's doing so well. And it's like, yeah, I think it's partially that we've kind of given him this quantum lifestyle, but the giving him that DHA as a building block for his brain, I think has been really, really important.
That's actually a good kind of area to dive into a little bit. Sort of just the idea of parenting. Like I've had a lot of friends that are just now having sort of their first kids. I'm getting old, I guess. But like how do you approach parenting differently with that quantum lens? You sort of just gave us a little bit of an overview, but I'd love to hear sort of like how you've tackled that, because you do a lot of counterintuitive things to what centralized medicine would say to do, like take your baby outside and like do things like that. So I'd love to hear your view of like, what does quantum parenting look like?
Yeah, I mean, it may probably will look a little different for everyone, but I had circadian light. I mean, I have circadian lighting really all around the house, like red night lights that are motion detected. Um, hardwire the house. I've never had a baby monitor for him, which like will freak out a lot of people because they're like, they have these video monitors for their babies, but I wouldn't even have a monitor in his room because he slept with us for the longest time anyway. And now he's in his own room, in his own bed, but I just kind of keep the doors like kind of cracked so I can hear him if he really needs me. But I've been really cautious about non-native EMF. Obviously the nutrition, I have been really careful with the DHA, make sure he's getting that, make sure his first foods were like bone marrow and like beef, like lots of roasts and things like that. And not really letting him be around screens. I think that's really important for children. Like we're so quick to just throw them in front of a screen. We really only turn the TV on like occasionally if my husband wants to watch football. The baby is really never awake anytime if the TV is on. Like, and I just I don't want him exposed to that. And I always, even from when he was first born, I was taking him outside at sunrise and during UVA, like even if he was cold, I would kind of wrap him up, and he's used to it now. When he wakes up, the first thing we do is go outside and say good morning to the sun. And at night, it's just kind of, it's the winter here now. It's just kind of dark here, and everyone winds down pretty early, goes to bed pretty early here. So yeah, my daughter, she is non-speaking autistic, and she's 16. And so that definitely comes with a lot of challenges. So if I do want to let her have like a screen for a little bit of time, the screen is completely red. It's on airplane mode. We've already downloaded games and videos for her, so she's not blasting herself with, and I turn off the Bluetooth and all of that. So I still will occasionally let her have a screen, but it's very controlled. And her diet is the same as my son's, really. Like I'm not going to cook separate meals for everybody. I don't have time for that.
Have you I wanted to, yeah, I knew that about your daughter, but I kind of wanted to ask you, is like, have you seen her symptoms and behaviors improve drastically since your whole family's lifestyle has changed a bit in the past like 3 years?
I wish I could say yes. We've actually had a really hard year with her. That's why Dr. Sarah came to stay with me for 6 weeks. She started, and I don't know if it was the new baby and moving to a new house. It's just a lot of change for her and being a teenager. But she's really had a difficult year over the last year. And so I want to say, like, quantum and light, it can heal everything and fix everything. But she's really struggled over the last year, and we've just started implementing some hydrogen inhalation for her, and that has actually made more of a difference than anything I've ever tried with her. And she cold plunges. Like, she loves to go in the cold plunge. She loves to go in the sauna. She loves grounding. She loves all that stuff. But she's definitely still struggled over the last year, and I'm glad that I have this different holistic way of looking at things, because there wouldn't have been much hope for us otherwise. And yeah, the hydrogen has made a big difference for her over the last year, or the last like couple of months for sure.
That's interesting. And yeah, all that kind of change in the environment, I'm sure, be challenging for anyone. But something, just looking at it from a holistic picture as well, just speaking of children, because I think it really is so important to highlight why, we talk about everything that we do, why you do what you do. And it's all about really the next generation. And to me, this is the biggest area of concern with, the digital babysitters. I mean, the increased rates of mental health conditions across the board. How do you think about the just solving kind of this low dopamine indoor living perspective from raising children and spreading the word more and getting solutions that can be far reaching?
I mean, I think conversations like this are important, and as much as I don't like the term like influencer, I do use my platform to try to talk about these things to hopefully reach other parents and reach, parents, people who are raising children, and hopefully spread this message as much as we can. That's like all we can really do. And then just like live by example. I mean, my goal is to get us out of the city, because, when we moved into this new house is when, again, my daughter's health kind of went crazy. I'm still thinking that it was, even though I did a lot of stuff to mitigate the non-native EMF, I think that this house had a lot more non-native EMF than our last house. I think that played a factor in things. And so, what I'm working to do is to try to get us out of the city, away from a lot of this stuff, and kind of move her into a better environment. But I really think we just have to have these conversations about why, because people just don't know. Like with my daughter, she's the whole reason I'm in alternative health in the beginning, because she had a vaccine injury and lost all of her language, eye contact, everything, lost everything when she was about 13 months. And that was my time where I'm like, holy crap, I just was doing everything the doctors told me to do, and look what happened to her. That was my moment of, like, I guess my red pill moment, if you want to call it that, where everything changed for me. I went down some crazy long, windy roads of being like a vegan yoga teacher and learning about a lot of stuff that did not work, that was not helpful. That's kind of what we do on our health journey. But having that happen to her, and a lot of stuff that's gone on with her health has just continued to send me down more rabbit holes, so yeah, the kids are vulnerable, and their brains are not fully developed, and we're exposing them to all of these things, the non-EMF, the screens, all of it, and it's a big problem. It really is.
Yeah, I just want to commend you for doing everything you've done, because it's not easy to come from the background you have and continually want to learn. I think it'd be very easy to sort of get to a certain point and just stop and give up, because there's so much, nuance to everything. It's very easy to get lost in the minutia, but it's the curiosity that you have that I think is valuable to your audience and to the show that we've done here today. I know personally, like, one of the things that really keeps me going is unfortunately, it's the anger I felt from being in the system and just feeling so let down, that I'm just like, oh, I gotta tell anybody I can about any of this stuff, even if I don't explain it as well as I probably could. But it's sort of that endless curiosity. Is there anything that you're excited about in the quantum space coming up that has you really jazzed, or any sort of upcoming events that you're sort of holding, or anything in the future for you?
Well, Carrie and I she's my partner. We have a podcast called Quantum Conversations. Also, we just did a really fun summit back in January. So we interviewed like a lot of our favorite people in different topics like non-native EMF, and great fun time. We're going to do another one this summer, so we're working on that now. Our goal, both of us, Carrie and I, are to continue to put out a lot, as much as we can, to reach people, right? So the summit was completely free for people to attend and watch live. We had like over 20 speakers and a lot of really good information. And so I'm just excited to continue to connect with others in this space, to see it growing, to see other people implementing it, and to do more fun things like the summit that Carrie and I did. I have my own podcast. I'm always trying to bring in, I know you're coming on soon, Ryan. Always try to bring in people to tell their stories and just get the word out to everyday people. I really want to make this information accessible, because I love Jack, but I think some people listen to him and they're like, what in the hell did he just say? Right. And I always say Carrie and I are like good cop, bad cop, because Carrie, she just can lay out the science on this stuff so well. But sometimes people are like, what did she just say? And I'm like, okay, yeah. So it's going to give you more energy and help you like burn more calories. Okay. So I'm kind of like, I try to keep it as simple for people as I possibly can. While I do understand the science, I want more people to adopt these things and start implementing them for themselves, for their kids. And I think that's how we really get people to change and allow people to find really good health that's sustainable.
Yeah, I think having a digestible message is important. It's tough because we get on here, want to talk to the expert researchers and spread the message. But that's why we love getting, people like yourself on here. You're kind of that like translator and can really drive it home and have that clinical experience, helping clients. So it's needed in all facets. I know my mom will tell me a lot when she's like, I have no idea what your podcast is about, but like it seemed really cool. So I was like, all right, well, maybe we got to not go as deep next time. So it's a balance. But Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you? You're Sarah Kleiner Wellness on most or all platforms, correct?
Yeah. That's Sarah Kleiner Wellness on Instagram, on YouTube. Just search it in there. I've got a podcast called the Evolving Wellness Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, all the things. And then Carrie and I have a podcast called Quantum Conversations. Again, where it's kind of this like good cop, bad cop thing, where we talk about these complex topics and make them digestible for the everyday person. So yeah, that's the best way to find me, is my website, reach out on Instagram. And yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, Sarah. We appreciate it. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.